Welcome back. Well, here's something that might alarm you. More than 90% of waste in South Africa does not get recycled. Now, this has resulted in landfills reaching saturation point. In other words, South Africans are throwing away the weight of nearly 15,000 Eiffel Towers of rubbish each year. Wrap your mind around that. And now we're running out of space. We're joined in studio by Thabo Magomola. He's the Acting Chief Director at Integrated Waste Management Support. Thabo, good morning, and thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, thank you.
For anybody who doesn't understand just how serious this is, what are we doing by allowing this to happen, by throwing away, not recycling? What is the worst case scenario here?
Well, the worst case scenario is one, we're creating an environmental hazard for our communities and our people. But just looking at it from an economic point of view, the figure that you mentioned, that 90% of waste that's not being diverted, that's going to landfill, has an economic value of almost 25 billion rand. So if you look at the amount of resources, in fact, that are actually going to landfill, it's quite a waste. And that's why, as a department, some time ago, we put in specific policy measures to look at addressing this in a constructive manner.
To bring it home to us, for those of us who aren't aware of what's happening in our kitchens and in our rubbish bins, the landfills, what type of waste are they only supposed to be dealing with and coping with?
So for the most part, landfills attract what we call municipal solid waste. So it's the waste from our kitchens, our houses. It's also waste like waste tires. It's just about everything except industrial waste and hazardous waste. So it's all the different, I think we have about 38 different waste streams in the country. And most of those, if they are not recycled, they go to landfill. But a large majority of those waste types actually are recyclable. And as a department, we're encouraging both separation at source activities as well as looking at recycling at the landfill, if not before the landfill.
What do you think is the problem? Why are South Africans not heeding the call to recycle? Is it that they don't know, they aren't aware, firstly? Or is it that the bins or whatever it is that they're supposed to be using aren't readily available for them to do?
So I think it's a combination of issues. I think that if you look at a society like ours, the idea of recycling seems like maybe what we would call a first world problem. I think also you have a scenario where there's just a general lack of awareness. And historically, if you look at the costs of tipping or disposal as compared to the cost of recycling, it almost seems like, well, it's a lot easier to actually dump the waste at a landfill, and a large part of our population are not aware of the dire effects of doing that. And that's why, as a department, we've adopted an internationally recognized policy called the Waste Management Hierarchy, which has waste minimization as the most preferred option at the top of the hierarchy. Then we look at reuse of waste, recycling, energy recovery, and landfill disposal is actually the last option.
Okay, so shouldn't all straight be heading there to the last option? What is waste minimization? You mentioned.
So waste minimization and waste avoidance is looking at a product when it comes to the end of its life cycle as a consumer to look, is it necessary for that waste to actually be disposed of? Because oftentimes what we see as waste for one person might be seen as something else for the other. So before you take a teaspoon when you go to a fast food and dump it in the dustbin, you need to think about, can you use that teaspoon again? And we have very interesting innovations around the world where people are even looking at edible cutlery, so that it doesn't go to, because plastic takes almost 800 years to disintegrate. So awareness is a big one, but we were fortunate that we've also got industry quite involved in looking at various types of industry initiatives. They're taking on the responsibility, even though they're producers of waste, in terms of remediating that waste, and that's increasing our recycling rates as well.
Who are the biggest offenders in terms of provinces? Where in the country are you seeing the biggest offenders? And are we looking at penalties in future? Will that be one way to go, is to fine people, or there should be some kind of legal recourse?
Well, I think from where we're sitting as national government, we're looking at more incentivizing and disincentivizing recycling and waste. So I wouldn't go as far as saying that there's necessary penalties. In terms of the culprits, you'll often find it's in those areas or those regions where there's not a high level of waste disposal services. It's a provincial and a municipal function, and as a national department, we look at supporting municipalities where we can in terms of encouraging separation at source activities. But from a budgetary point of view, there are at times challenges. So So I would say that the biggest polluters you might find are those communities that don't have the level of awareness.
What will happen if we run out, like we're already running out of landfill sites? What's going to happen?
Well, I think there is still scope to create a few more landfill sites, but it's not the option that we're looking for. If we get to a point where there are no more landfills, we're just going to have a scenario where we've got waste just collecting, in eyesight. So we're working very hard with industry to look at really aggressively increasing the recycling rates. I think we're getting far higher recycling rates than the 10% that you spoke about earlier was a 2013 stat. So we're actually galvanizing industry, and we're getting a higher level of recycling. And we have programs like a particular program we have called the Recycling Enterprise Support Program, where we're targeting disadvantaged communities to look at economic opportunities in the waste streams, and that's creating a lot of interest, because people are starting to see that it's actually not waste. I can recycle it, I can earn a buck from this so-called waste. All
right, always a silver lining. Thanks very much. Thabo Magomola, who is the Acting Chief Director and Integrated Waste Management Support.
It's nearly 19 after 8. Let's remind you of our top stories on ANCA. A religious rights board is appealing to congregants who fell victimized by a controversial doom-spraying pastor to lay a complaint.
Education officials are probing shocking claims of racial and sexual abuse at a Wynberg school.
And the ANC and its 101 veterans to meet again before the end of the year in a bid to strengthen the party.
Quick look now at some of your